All right, so we ready to talk about beeps here?
Yeah, sure.
What
Um,
what day what day are we on? Just anybody know?
This is
this
our
is
fifth time doing it,
Fifth.
right? Yep. Day
fifth time.
five.
Okay. Any issues with the beeper and the
No, no,
procedure?
no. Still, works just fine.
All right, good. What's number one?
So number one, so I was in a coffee shop doing some work, and the beep went off as I was looking up at the ceiling, and I was picturing trees in Regent's Park. Um, yeah, so I wasn't actually seeing the ceiling. What I was actually seeing was um, the park and trees.
So your eyeballs are aimed upwards. And
Yeah.
eyeball, would you say your eyeballs are aimed at the ceiling or just aimed upwards?
Um, they were
Or
aimed, yeah, more upwards, but my
okay,
head was a bit up as well.
okay. And what you're seeing, what you're experiencing is the trees of Regent's Park. And what do you
Yeah.
see?
I see a road with the park either side of it, and and like a series of trees going down alongside the road.
And is the center of your interest the trees rather than the road? Or would it be just as good to say, well, I see Regent's Park, or I see the road through Regent's Park, or I see the trees of Regent's Park, or I see the Regent's Park scene? Or is it about the trees?
No, it's not just about the trees, it's about the road as well and the park. Um, that's where I that's where I would go into Regent's Park normally. So it was kind of the scene. It was the whole scene. It wasn't just about the trees. There was very much there was the road and the park either side and the trees.
Okay. So I'm seeing sort of the entryway into Regent's Park.
Yeah.
And is it about the entryway, or is this, as far as you're concerned, just about I'm somehow conveying Regent's Park to myself?
Um, no, it was more about the conveying of Regent's Park.
Okay. And is the seeing in color, black and white,
It was color.
and in motion, or is this like a still view?
It was still.
Okay. Borders, or does it seem to just disappear off to the sides?
Um, yeah, no borders. It just disappears.
Okay.
Sides.
And so is it fair to say then that in my experience, is this really seeing of Regent's Park and that's it? I'm not seeing the ceiling where my eyes are aimed at. I'm not hearing the coffee shop, even though there's no doubt clatter and talking and whatever that goes on in coffee shops.
No, it was just the seeing of Regent's Park.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was quite potent. I was, yeah, not that this is, this is separate to the beat, but um, I was working and I was trying to think about what the trees were in Regent's Park. Um, and I think that's why I was looking up and then I was picturing it and it was, but the beep caught in flight the image of the park as I was looking up.
Okay. And is what you're working on related to the trees in Regent's Park?
Yeah, so I was writing a sentence and I wanted to talk about I wanted to say what the trees in the park were, and then I suddenly realized, oh, hang on, I don't know what the trees are. My knowledge of like tree species is basically zero. So I so I looked up and I pictured the park, and I was trying to get a sense of like what they were. Um, but yeah, but that was all like leading up to the moment of the beep.
So sounds like it's sort of fair to say I'm visualizing what I am attempting to write about, or it's,
Yeah.
and I think I'm good. Cody, got any
I think I'm good as well for the speed.
number two?
So number two is walking along a street near my apartment, and the beep went off as I was looking to the left, and I noticed the number 37 on a sign, on like a well, it was on a it was on like a small white gate that led into a house, and I just noticed it because it was it was just the number 37. It was gold, written against a black circle, which was against a small white gate, and the beep went off. The moment of the beep was me noticing that number and the small white gate that it was on.
And so by noticing, how does that go exactly?
So my attention was hovering on it for what felt like felt like a few seconds. It caught my gaze, my attention momentarily.
And so I understand that what's directly present to me is at a very least, the number. We haven't quite established whether what else about the other stuff about the circle or the gate was there, but you said noticing, you said attention, and I don't really quite care about the words, but what my interest is I could imagine, and noticing and attention could all mean I'm visually noticing this, I'm seeing this, or not. It could be something else too. And so that experientially, my question is, how was that present?
So it was the number 37 and the fact that it was gold. It just sort of stuck out to me. I wasn't thinking anything. It just sort of just visually, it kind of just grabbed me, and I didn't. I'm not sure why. Not that we know why, but there wasn't like a bodily thing or even particularly a mental thing. It's just I think I was into the goldness of the number, and there was something unusual about it. The gold number against a black circle, which was then against a big white gate. It seemed somehow different from everything around it, like slightly unusual, and so that's why it sort of just held my gaze for a few seconds.
And so the question here, I guess, is I experientially, is this like I'm into the gold, the gold of the number, I'm into the golden number, I'm into the color contrast of gold on black on white or something like that? And
it was the golden number and the contrast against the black and the white. It's difficult for me to know how separate those things are. I suppose, I'm not sure I really know the answer to that question. I think I was definitely, the main thing in the experience was the gold number 37 against the black and the white gaze. But I was focusing more on the number 37 than the gate it was on, but I was noticing the gate as well. So
let me see whether I can ask an easier question or more straightforward question. Is this more about the number 37, or is it more about the colors gold or gold against white or gold against black against white or whatever.
I think it was just about more about the number 37.
So the 37 as a number,
The 37, yeah, it was the
not,
number 37. It was more about that than the gold, but it was also about the fact that it was gold.
okay.
Um, yeah, yeah, I don't know why I noticed it. Um, um,
So what I'm understanding is that for whatever reason, which we don't need to understand, which is the good news about this situation, but I'm somehow involved with the number 37 as a number
mm,
in the
yeah,
realm of numbers. 37 is somehow standing out to me, and at the same time, I'm also interested in the manner in which that it comes to me, the colors of the colors of it, the
yeah,
colors of what's surrounded, and whatever.
yeah,
So I've got a number interest and a color interest.
yeah.
Okay. Anything else to say about the number interest?
Um, no, uh, no. Again, it's really difficult. It's almost a bit frustrating actually because I sort of want to know why I was interested in it or why it held my attention and my gaze for longer than I feel like it should have. But I don't know the answer. It just did. It was more of just a curious, oh, there's 37 and gold and white and black and white. Um, yeah.
Well, I recognize the frustrations of it. I think there's probably no answer to the question.
Mm.
Why the questions of why I think always imply, but not usually explicitly state some kind of a framework.
Mm.
Like we could speculate about, well, 37 is for this and that, but the implication would be, well, let's look in the last hour and see where 37 came from. Or let's look in the last day and see where 37 came from. Now let's think about it from the standpoint of age or from the standpoint of whatever. And those standpoints are usually not made explicit, but are integral to the explanation. And so I, for the most part, give up on explanation. I just don't think it's possible.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say about it is that the way you find out about the answer to those things is over the long haul. If you sampled and then sampled some more and then sampled some more, eventually you'd start to see, well, I see patterns of what I'm interested in. And then you'd have something that is really probably worthwhile to try to explain. I am interested in numbers. This could be just like a random event, what the heck. But it could be over a lot of sampling if I'm fixated on numbers for a variety of reasons, then you got something to explain.
Mm. Yeah, because I thought afterwards, like a bit later on, I thought, oh, maybe because I'm 37 years old, is that why I was interested in it? But I'm almost 100% certain that's just me retrospectively
Right.
and analyzing it, and that's not that. So, yeah.
I think that's not possible.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
On to number 3.
Yep.
So, yeah, number 3. So I was at home, and I was putting some stuff in the fridge, and the beep went off as I was holding a bottle of apple juice in my right hand, and I was trying to basically shove it into a space in the fridge. And I was struggling to get it into the space because there's no space in the fridge. And so I was holding the apple juice in my right hand. I was holding some other things in my left hand and looking at the fridge, looking at the spaces whilst also trying to shove stuff in. Yeah.
So is my experience of what I see or what I do or both?
So the center of the experience was seeing seeing the shelves of the fridge. I was looking at them, and I was trying to push the apple juice into the gap. But the apple juice and the other items in my hand were in the sort of periphery of my experience. The center of the experience was the layers of the fridge. And I was just, yeah, I wasn't thinking anything. I was just looking at them.
Mm-hmm. And looking at them with the intention of finding a space? Or not even that, just looking at them?
No, yeah, not even that. Just looking at them.
Mm-hmm. And I see not only the shelf on which I'm manipulating or whatever, but I see other shelves as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't a cognitive thing in the way that like I would have expected it to be. Like it wasn't like I was actively thinking, oh, maybe it can go here or here or here. It wasn't like that. It was just I was just seeing all the shelves and holding the apple juice to try and get it into a space.
Okay. And is the holding and trying to get in experienced, or is that coming out of my body sort of on autopilot? And really what my experience is of seeing?
Yeah, So the holding of the apple juice and the trying to shove it in, that is kind of on autopilot. Whereas the experience itself is me just seeing the shelves at the back of the fridge.
Okay. The shelves, did you say shelves and the back of the fridge?
Yeah, so like there was a light at the very back of the fridge as well, which was also quite a prominent feature of the experience.
And more prominent than the items on the shelf, would you say? Like,
about the same, I'd say.
so I'm seeing the items on the shelf, and I am seeing the light that is in the back of the fridge. Yeah. And on autopilot, I'm trying to stuff a bottle of apple juice in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But mostly it's a visual taking in.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a very visual thing. I wasn't I was kind of aware that I was holding a few things in my left hand, and I was holding the apple juice in my right hand trying to shove it in, but that wasn't really they weren't really that present in the experience. It was much more just I was just focused on the shelves and the sort of there was like three of them, and then a light at the back.
And when you say the shelves, do you mean the shelves themselves, the metal or plastic or whatever they are? Or
no, it was more like just like I was focused on the spaces in between the shelves as opposed to the actual physical shelves themselves.
So the geometry of the shelves?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't like the material itself. It was more the fact that there are, like you said, the geometry. There are
this layer and that layer and this layer, whatever. Got it. So what I've got from this is that I'm in the act of trying to put my apple juice away, but in my experience it is actually quite well parallel to, but not directly involved in that act. For example, I see the light. The light doesn't have anything to do with the shoving of the apple juice, and I see the geometry of the shelves, and that really doesn't have anything to do with the act either. I'm noticing what's falling on my retina.
Yeah,
and it's falling on my retina, no doubt, because I'm trying to put the juice away. But I'm not looking for a space to put the apple juice away. So is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I feel like that's a very faithful representation of it.
Okay.
Quite an interesting one actually when I think back on it, or when I look at my notes, because as you said, I was just trying to put apple juice away, but I wasn't. But that was completely peripheral to the actual experience I was having. Yeah, kind of interesting.
It is interesting.
Mm.
And what I would say, just as sort of an aside to somebody who's interested in these kinds of things, it does I think point out why I have such a negative view of armchair introspection, because I think you would never have gotten to this kind of an experience if you had set yourself the task of, well, what's it like for me to put apple juice into the refrigerator? It would never have been, well, I'm going to look at the light in the back of the refrigerator and see the geometry of the shelf. It would have been something about I'm looking for a space, or I'm trying to decide whether I should move this or that or whatever. And that isn't what this experience was about.
Yeah.
And the same is true for the previous speak too. So your armchair introspection probably wouldn't have gotten you to be an interest in the goldness and the 37ness of the.
Yeah. Keep it sort of I don't know if missing the forest for the trees is, I suppose, almost the right metaphor, but not quite. It's sort of, yeah, focusing too much. Yeah, like you said, the armchair introspection is way too restrictive for this sort of thing.
Yeah. It's either missing the forest for the trees or missing the trees for the forest. I think it could be either way. And
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, very true.
All right, on to number 4.
Yep, beat 4.
So number 4 was, so I was sat on my sofa, I was watching the news, and I was having my lunch, and beep went off as I bit into a sandwich. Well, I was biting into a piece of lettuce that was poking out of the sandwich, and the beep went off as I was biting into that. And the thing that was present to me was a kind of a wetness and a coldness and a crunch of sort of, yeah, wet, cold lettuce. I was very aware of that as the beep went off.
And so is the central part of your experience sort of a wet, cold crunch thing? So sort of just that sensation, doubtless it's from lettuce, but the lettuceness is sort of out of that, or is it more fair to call this I'm feeling, or somehow the wet, cold lettuce is in my experience?
I was just very aware that, at that precise moment, I just had just all of the sensations of biting into wet, cold lettuce. That was sort of my entire experience at the moment. If that makes sense. Like I didn't really see much of what was going on either, because I was sort of leaning over the sandwich, and I didn't. I don't know if I don't actually know if I had my eyes open or closed at the time. I was just. It was as I was biting into the lettuce, basically, but it was kind of an intentional thing, because I was going for the bit that was poking out on one side. So it wasn't like I was eating a sandwich and I happened to have like bitten into a bit of lettuce, so then the beep went off as I was chewing the lettuce. It was more that I was aiming at this piece of lettuce and I bit into it and started chewing, and the experience of the wetness and the coldness and the crispness of the lettuce, that was going on as the beep went off.
Right, okay. And is that aiming for the lettuce part of my experience as well, or is that sort of context?
That was kind of context. I feel like that was just before, that wasn't caught in flight by the beep.
I've set this task up for myself, and then I've gone for that piece, and now, and when the beep goes off, I'm into the doing of it, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah.
And is it possible to say, so is this about sort of like, is this about my sensing of this? So I guess what I'm trying to say is this about like something like my lips or my teeth or my mouth or whatever feeling these sensations? Or is it about sort of the object, I guess, or the no doubt the lettuce, but
Yeah, no, the first thing, it was very much like an oral thing. Um, the center of the experience was very much like in my mouth and around my mouth, like all of the sensations. Um, the experience was all of those sensations essentially. Sort of that was the center, I guess.
So can I ask about, am I experiencing the wetness and I'm experiencing the coldness and I'm experiencing the crunch as sort of three separate strands, or am I experiencing a cold, wet crunch?
That's a really good question. I feel like there was some separation. Um, the wetness and the coldness were more together. But the crunch, the sensation of the crunch was separate than the wetness and the coldness.
Okay. And is the crunch a mechanical thing? I feel my teeth going through the letters, or I feel the crunch, or I hear the crunch.
I was more hearing the crunch.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was definitely more hearing it because it was a very small piece of lettuce. It wasn't. I didn't feel it that much.
Okay.
Quite a loud crunch.
It was a loud crunch. Okay.
Yeah.
So my experience, as I'm gathering it, then is a sort of a two and a half or two-ish stranded thing. One about the cold, wet, maybe separate, but probably together, and then the other about hearing the crunch.
Yeah.
And the rest of it, we could say I'm eating my sandwich or I'm going for the lettuce that's sticking out of the edge or whatever. But that's mostly context, my experiences of the cold, wet, and the crunch.
Yeah. It was a very, it was a very like a sensory thing. Everything else was context, I guess.
Okay. Well, I think I'm good.
me too.
Number 5.
Yeah, so number 5, I don't want to disclose if that's all right.
Okay.
And
Number
yeah,
6.
same is actually true for number 6, unfortunately.
Okay.
So yeah, that's I just got the 4 beeps today.
Okay. Sounds good to me. So shall we do this again?
Yeah. If you guys are happy to do it again.
Sure.
When would be good? Works for me.
Great.
All right.
Yeah.
And do you have any comments, questions before we wrap it up for today?
No, I suppose I just want to say that I think I feel like I don't know if this is the right thing to say, but I feel like I'm getting better at this. Like I feel like I'm I'm able to notice things and articulate it in a way that I wasn't before. Because I remember at the very beginning when we did like the first and second session, there was a lot of like bracketing of presuppositions and explanations and things. But yeah, I just want to say thank you because I feel like the as you said, it's like an iterative training process to it, and I'm now really starting to kind of appreciate that because I'm sort of noticing how to do it, if that makes sense, without without influencing me thinking about how to do it.
I do think it's a complicated thing, and I do think it's difficult to master without doing it. So I think
Yeah.
it comes down to what we were talking about, armchair introspection earlier on.
Yeah.
And your experiences are largely sensory awareness, maybe 4 for 4 today, if I'm recalling correctly. So you're interested in the sensory aspects of the environment for whatever reason. And I would say that most people, maybe not most people, but many people, maybe most people, I don't really make that much of a distinction about that because I don't have random samples or whatever, but maybe most people who have sensory awareness take a while to sort of accept that that's what's actually going on in their experience. And when they accept it, then it gets to be easier to describe what's going on in their experience.
Yeah.
If they rule out, which I think a lot of people do for whatever reason, if they rule out sensory stuff as being not important or not there or whatever, then describing experience is difficult.
Yeah. And it's like, and it's like, just as you know, I'm in terms of like sensory, like the images I have now, like before, I think at the beginning of doing all of this, I remember I was trying to explain the physics of things, like, oh, I couldn't have seen this because I saw something else behind it. And then you were saying, don't explain it based on the physics of the real world, just explain the perception and the experience you're having. So now, like, for instance, that first beep, I was then very aware that I wasn't actually seeing the coffee shop or the ceiling. I was just seeing the park, basically.
Right.
Whereas before, I think I would have tried to explain it with the physics of the real world somehow.
Right. And that's a challenge if that's not what your experience is, because then you're fighting against yourself.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Alrighty.
Thanks so much, guys.
You're welcome. We will see you on 2 weeks from today.
Yep.
See you soon. Take care. Bye.
See you then, Joe.
See you.
Bye.